The methods that we have been defining till now have self as the first parameter, and when they are called, they automatically receive the current instance as the first argument. These methods are more precisely called instance methods to distinguish them from the class methods and static methods that we are going to study now. So when we simply say methods of a class, we generally mean instance methods because the other two are not as frequently used. So now let's see what are class methods. Here we have defined a class method. A class method is a method that is associated with the class itself, not with any particular instance of the class. To make a method a class method, we need to add this line before the method definition. It is a function decorator about which we'll study later on. So if you add this line before the method, it becomes a class method. Like instance methods, class methods also have a special first parameter. The first parameter in a class method is named CLS. You could write any other name here instead of CLS, but just like self, this name CLS is also a strong convention. This word is a short form of class. Since class is a reserved word, this word CLS is used. So in an instance method, the first parameter is self, and in the class method, the first parameter is CLS. When you call this method, you don't need to provide any argument for this parameter. Python will automatically send the class as the argument for this parameter CLS. A class method can be invoked using the class name or an instance. So let's invoke it using the class name. We have not created any instance of the class, but still we could call this method because the class method has nothing to do with instances. When this call will execute, Python will automatically send the class as the first argument. So this parameter CLS refers to the class object. And that is why here inside this method, we have accessed this class variable A through CLS instead of hard coding the class name. Let's run this program. So this method was executed and the value of this class variable A was printed. A class method can work only with the class variables. It can't access instance variables as it does not have a self parameter. So if we have to make a method that needs to use only the class variables, we can make that method a class method. A class method can also be invoked using an instance, but it makes more sense to invoke it using the class name. Now let us add a class method to the person class that we have made in the previous lecture. So here we have this person class. Let's add a class method to it. So first we'll write this line @ class method, and now we'll define the method. Inside this method, we have used these two class variables, count and species. Now let's call this method here. And again, we'll call this method here after creating two instances. Let's run this. So we got this output. We could call this method here using any of these two instances. So let us write here P1. So this also worked. We get the same output, but calling with class name is definitely more natural. So when you have to process some information that is associated with the class itself, not with any instance object, you can turn your method into a class method by writing this decorator and specifying CLS as the first parameter. The most common use of class methods is to define factory methods. Let us understand it with the help of an example. Again, we take the same person class here. I've deleted the class variables to keep it short and simple. We can create a new instance object of this class by providing name and age. There may be situations when we want to create instance objects of type person from different types of data. For example, we may have a string that contains name and age separated by a comma, or we may have a dictionary that contains name and age. You might read this type of data from a file or from any other place. Now you want to be able to create an instance of type person from this string also and this dictionary also. Python does not support function overloading, so there can be only one type of initializer. We cannot have more than one definitions for init method inside a class. So to add this functionality to our class, we have to rely on class methods. So here we'll add a class method. CLS as usual is the first argument, and after that it takes a string. We are splitting this string to get this name and age. Now we'll create a new instance here. We know that inside the class methods, the CLS parameter refers to the class object. So CLS here refers to the person class, and writing this will create a new person instance object, and this init method will be called. And now we return this newly created instance object. Now here we'll call this class method. This string is sent as argument to this method, and the instance object returned from this method is assigned to this name p3. Now we'll call the display method. Let's run this. So we were able to create a new instance object of type person from this string. Similarly, we can make a class method to create a person object from this type of dictionary which has name and age as keys. So let's create another class method here. So here we are sending the values of the dictionary as argument to this person class initializer. So both these methods are calling the same init method. Now we'll call this class method here. This dictionary D is sent as the argument. Now we call the display method. Let's run this. So now we were able to create a new person object from this dictionary. So class methods allow us to provide alternative initializers for our class. These are called factory methods. We can use class methods as factory methods to create instance objects in different ways. Now suppose we have this employee class and we want to create a person object from an employee object. This employee class has first name, last name, birth year, and salary as instance variables. Let's import the employee class here. And we have an employee object here. Now we'll create a class method named fromEmployee. Employee object has first name and last name as instance variables. And in person class, we only need name. So we add these two to get name. And to get age, we subtract the birth year from the current year. For this, we have to import datetime class from the datetime module. After finding this name and age, we send both these things to the person class initializer. And then we return the newly created instance object. Now we'll call this method. Let's run this. So we could create a person object from an employee object.